Kayla, thanks for joining us today. My name is Anita Lam-Stevoska. I am the Postgraduate Recruitment Specialist here at the Faculty of Education and Social Work. Today with me, we have the Program Director for our Master of Educational Leadership, Professor Deidre Fevre, and also our Assistant Dean, Postgraduate Studies, Dr. Kane Meissel. Thanks, Deidre and Kane, for joining us today. Can we just start by asking, so we have a lot of students who are interested in our master programs, but we have quite a few. So can you give some advice on what questions one should ask themselves before they decide which program is for them, or where the programs can take them?
Well, maybe we can begin by talking about what the actual programs offer a little and then move to that question. Do you want to begin with the...
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think one of the questions that students should ask is, first of all, whether they're sort of thinking that they might be more interested in some independent research, or whether they would really be more interested in a fully taught program. So a number of our programs offer full coursework only, and then some of the other programs have a research component, which is usually 1 or 2 semesters of independent work with a supervisor. Deidre?
Yeah, and add on to that sometimes you don't know when you begin what you want to do, and we have a lot of flexibility. So you might enrol in a taught masters and do a course and think, wow, I'm really interested in research. I really love to engage in research. And then you can change over if you've got some research methods and you've done well. So there's flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is that don't feel like, if you have signed up to a particular program, that doesn't mean that you're stuck in that program. So, sometimes it's actually quite helpful just to get started, do your first 2 courses, and then kind of reevaluate and think, am I in the right program, or should I have a conversation with either the program director or with Anita or somebody else to discuss whether there's different options that might suit me better.
And in terms of content, one of the questions I'd ask myself is, this is a big commitment of time and financial resources. What is it I want to know and get out of this? So ask yourself, is it that I want to understand leadership better? Is it that I'd like to be promoted into a leadership role? Well, then in that case, maybe you'd look at the MEd leadership, which specifically focuses in that area. But maybe there's something else that you would like to know. So
for example, if you're sort of really wanting to extend your practice, you've been teaching in an area for a number of years, and there's aspects of your own practice that you want to sort of interrogate or reflect on, then the Master of Education practice might be a really good option. And so that's a fully taught program, but the nature of the courses that you can choose within that program allow you to sort of reflect a bit more deeply on the way that your pedagogical practice has evolved, and whether there's ways that you could further adapt that. Or alternatively, if you do want to do a Master of Education, which is more of a research program, then you can sort of take that even a bit further and actually do a project that sort of delves into that more deeply.
Thank you. We get asked quite a lot, like we have lots of people who are interested in doing a research master's, but they're a bit unsure if they can manage doing a research on their own. Like, do you have any advice you can give them, or?
Well, I think one of the first things to be really aware of is that it's not on your own. So you do have supervision throughout that process. So although it is an independent research project, you do have a lot of support throughout that process. So I think one of the important things is to not feel like it's all going to be on my own, but also that it's important to have conversations with the staff that are teaching in the courses, to other students that have gone through the process, that have done a thesis or a dissertation. How about you, Deidre?
Well, I think community is really important because when you're on your own, things are difficult. They're more difficult. And so in doing a research master's, you begin with coursework. So you really want to capitalise on that time, and whether it's online community or face-to-face, find out who your colleagues are, find out who has similar interests, and really build those relationships so that then when you do your research, and sometimes research can be independent in terms of you're focusing on something with the support of your supervisors, but there aren't other students doing the same thing. But you have that community around you in terms of the process and support. So I think that's a really important question, and we've got lots of systems and ways of working to help people so they do feel connected.
Thank you, Deidre and Kane. So to build on that question, students doing a research master's, or also because of the number of online courses these days, a lot of students might be a bit worried about the kind of support and resources that they can get in terms of building a sense of community. Will you be able to talk about what kind of support and resources we have?
Sure, shall I begin? Because I lead a program that has a very big online component. For those who choose to do it online, you can do it face-to-face. But we have, for example, 160, 170 students in an online course. So we think that community is really, really key, and we have lots of ways of doing that, including having people create their own study groups, having people sometimes actually meet up face-to-face. Maybe they're literally in Invercargill or Kaitaia in other parts of the country, and we sort of set up projects and things so that people are intentionally working together. Obviously that happens in the face-to-face class when people walk into the classroom and they see each other, and it's a small country and people already have lots of connections as well, and they create connections. But it is a very intentional part of our pedagogy to make sure we create this relational practice where people can connect with each other and also with the staff.
Yeah, so I think that is a point of difference as well across some of the programs. So for example, Deidre's program, the Master of Educational Leadership, does have that option as a fully taught, fully online option. Whereas in the Master of Education, for example, or the Master of Education practice, you can choose whether to do individual courses online or face-to-face, but not every course will necessarily be offered in one mode or the other.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
So in terms of community, the Masters in Educational Leadership has a number of ways you can engage in it. So you can do it entirely online. You can be living in a different part of New Zealand to Auckland, or the world even actually, and you can do entirely online with an online community. Or you could do it entirely face-to-face, coming to campus because that's what you're choosing to do and you want to be connecting with people in that way. Or, as many of our students do, you can do some of each, and you can change as you go. You can do, depending on what's offered, of course, at the time in terms of face-to-face, you can sort of mix and match courses. So you'll see that there's a Masters in Educational Leadership that is called Auckland Online, and sometimes people can get a bit confused and think, which one do I enrol in? Well, if you want a 100% online, that is what you would enrol in. If you want to be on campus, you would enrol in the regular MEd leadership, but that doesn't stop you from moving backwards and forwards between online and non-online courses.
Yeah, and I think that really connects with our other master's programs. So the Master of Education and the Master of Education Practice are more like that latter model where you choose the program and then you can mix in some online courses, some face-to-face courses, only online courses or only face-to-face, but you're not choosing the program based on whether it's online or not. It is a mixed mode program, both of the Master of Education and Master of Education Practice. So what that means is that every course will have a range of different opportunities for engagement via an online mode. So when it is offered online, there'll be, likewise with what Deidre was saying with the Master of Education Leadership online courses, there are ways that of building community with via breakout rooms, via face-to-face meetups as well, or Zoom catch-ups. There's office hours where you can speak with your course director, various different ways of engaging.
Thank you. It's good to know that it's fairly flexible in terms of the delivery mode.
Yeah, so if it is a face-to-face course, there's always, I think it's important even to realise that with a face-to-face course, that doesn't mean that there isn't any online component either. So it does mean that the primary mode of instruction is likely to be on campus in generally a sort of a lecture kind of workshop discussion type structure, but there'll still be elements that are online via the Canvas page, which is our learning management system. There's discussion groups there as well, various different components.
Thank you. In terms of flexibility, a lot of our students would be probably working full-time. What's the workload like, or is it manageable if they're still working?
That's a really important question. And it is regarded as full-time to do 2 30-point courses a semester, and it's regarded as half-time to do 1 30-point course. And on average, that's something between 20 and 25 hours a week for a course. So you're probably sitting there doing the maths right now going, wow, that's a lot of time. And it is. I do really want to make sure people understand it is a lot of time. It is a big commitment. But the thing about that time is some weeks there'll be less work, and then building up to assignment time, for example, there'll be a lot more work. So it's not necessarily the same across all the weeks. But the message I'd really like people to understand is that it's like a job. It is a lot of work, but it's very rewarding and very exciting. But it does take a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think, as you point out, many of our students are working, and many of them are working full-time. And the vast majority do extremely well, have great success. So I think that is testament to demonstrate that people can really succeed, you know. So just because you're working, it certainly doesn't mean that you can't study, but it does mean, as Deidre said, that you need to consider how you fit that into your life so that you have a good balance between the two. And certainly my recommendation is that if you're working full-time, don't try and study full-time as well. My recommendation would be to study part-time, or vice versa. If you're studying full-time and maybe work part-time, then that's a really good balance. But it really does vary by individual. Some do both and still do very well as well. So one of the other important things in terms of that sort of workload balance is to be aware that a lot of course directors will actually try and structure the assignments to fit around holiday periods, so that you get the benefit of you know, if you are teaching in a full-time, within a school full-time, then you actually generally will have the holiday period to do the major assignments as well.
So I'm excited to be sitting here talking with you both about our graduate programs, because, you know, one of the most rewarding things for me is seeing people come into the MEd leadership. They might be a bit nervous. Maybe it's 20 years since they studied, or maybe 5 or 6 years. People come in and they're a little anxious. Can I do this? Do I have the skills? And then, you know, you see them a few years later walking across graduation, or they write an email, they've been promoted, they've got a new job. Maybe they've moved even into a new area. Maybe they've moved into policy, or a larger leadership position, or consulting, professional development. So it's really exciting, really, for me to see what people get out of this and their growth from when they first arrive, from, you know, actually, like the people watching this video right now, trying to decide, is graduate study for me, to where they're at a few years on.
So can one of these master programs lead on to further studies, like a PhD or EDD?
Yeah, so actually any of our research masters programs do enable the possibility of further study. And I think, you know, one of the really cool things to see, as Deidre was saying before, that you see often when students first start out, they're not really sure whether it is a taught masters that they want to do or a research masters that they're really keen on. And so I've had a number of students that have come into my postgraduate course and sort of said, well, actually, this is going to be just a one-off. I'm just exploring. I don't really know what I'm planning to do. And then by the end of the semester, they're like, oh, wow, I really loved this. I want to do more. They've gone off and done further courses. And then often they've ended up working with me as a supervisor as well. So you see them right through that process. And I've had a couple of students who have then chosen to actually go on and do a PhD with me. And so you actually end up with this quite long relationship that you build with a student over 5 or 6 years at times. And it's really exciting and really cool to see the growth from that sort of initial period where you're sort of saying, oh, I don't know if this is quite for me. And then by the end of the PhD, they're actually really teaching me things and I'm learning from the student. And that's I think, the pinnacle of my job, the best aspect of my job is where you see that growth over a number of years. And all of those students have then gone on to really pretty exciting jobs after that as well.
Thanks, Kane, and thank you, Deidre. Is there anything else you would like to add about the programs in general?
Yeah, there is one thing. Some of these programs, like the ME Leadership, are actually really quite structured, and we've done that intentionally to lead you through a progression of ideas and theories and research. And so if you do enrol in something like the ME Leadership, it is important that you talk with an advisor and you do make sure that you do enrol in the courses that are part of that program and you follow that program.
Yeah, and so one of the points of difference with the Master of Education and the Master of Education practice is that there is a little bit more flexibility. So if you're a bit unsure about exactly what you want to enrol in at the moment, you can just kind of get started. And as long as you talk to somebody within the first 2 courses, so before the end of that second course, to make sure that you're in the right program, you do have that flexibility potentially to change to a different program if you find that you want to try something different.
Perfect. And you mentioned earlier it might be possible to change from taught to research as well.
Yeah, that's right. So the Master of Education is the research program, and the Master of Education practice is the taught option. And so, if you start out doing a taught program and you find, actually I'm really excited about this and I'd really like to explore the opportunity of doing a research pathway, then you can talk to somebody. But it is important to talk to somebody before you go on too far, because otherwise you can end up doing extra points.
And it's the same with the ME Leadership. You can do taught or research.
Yeah, and there's wiggle room in between to change from one to...
That's where you need to talk with an advisor to make sure you do the right courses.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deidre and Kane. Thanks for joining us today. Ka pai.